The thumping bass of an EDM remix of Happy Birthday vibrated through the floor, a relentless pulse that drilled into Aiden's skull. It was a cacophony of slurred conversations and the clinking of champagne flutes, a migraine in audio form. Prying his eyes open was a monumental effort. He pushed himself up, his hand gripping the plush arm of a sofa, and surveyed the scene. In the distance, a colossal, 10-tiered cake, a rainbow monstrosity at least 6 feet wide, dominated the room. The entire ballroom was swathed in a gaudy spectacle of gold and glitter, and for a moment, he was utterly lost. Today was his birthday. He remembered a quieter affair, an elegant dinner his parents had thrown, inviting old family friends and distinguished guests. It was meant to be a celebration, but also a prayer of sorts, a good luck party, as his mother had called it. He'd been frail since birth, plagued by a chronic illness, and doctors had warned that this year would be a difficult hurdle. Had he cleared it? His last memory was of the moment before cutting his own, much more tasteful, cake. A sharp pain had seized his chest, stealing his breath. The gentle classical music had faded, replaced by the panicked shouts of his family. Then, nothing. But this place, this ballroom, dripping with a kind of aggressive new money ostentation, was certainly not the aesthetic of his family. A tall man in a tailored suit approached, his expression shifting from concern to sharp disapproval as he reached out to steady Aiden, who was swaying slightly. Aiden didn't recognize him, but the man's furrowed brow and tight jaw radiated hostility. Instinctively, Aiden tried to pull away. The man's grip tightened, his face darkening as he grabbed Aiden's shoulders, his voice a low growl. He demanded to know what Aiden thought he was doing. Hadn't Aiden himself said he would help him get close to Jax? Was getting drunk and pathetic his idea of helping? Was he having second thoughts? Aiden? Jax? The names echoed in his throbbing head. He was bewildered that this stranger knew his name and was about to protest that he never drank. But the name Jax stopped him cold. He went rigid, the fight draining out of him. That was the name of the villain from the novel he'd been reading last night. The book was a trashy online serial, something like The Shadow Lover. His sister had shown it to him, amused that the protagonist shared his name. The plot was a dreary affair of a toxic relationship with no satisfying resolution. But Aiden remembered the character of Jax vividly, because his storyline had been so repulsive. The protagonist, a doormat of a character, was indebted to the main love interest's family and deeply in love with him, a combination that left him with no self-respect. He would do anything to help his lover, Ethan. When they learned that Jax, a boorish millionaire, had a penchant for attractive young men as arm candy and had been eyeing the protagonist, a plan was formed. Jax was also competing with Ethan for a major tech merger. So, at the behest of Ethan's mother, the protagonist offered to get close to Jax, to distract him and ensure he missed the crucial meeting. The plan, of course, had worked. Jax, captivated, missed the conference call, his reputation tanked, and Ethan swept in to secure the deal. Aiden had found the scheme so distasteful he'd skimmed through those chapters. He vaguely recalled that Jax, furious at the deception, had brutalized the protagonist in retaliation. Later, after Ethan rescued him, Jax became the story's primary antagonist, a dark force dedicated to destroying them both, until Ethan's company finally grew powerful enough to bankrupt him and run him out of the city. Aiden's gaze fell to the collection of empty, overturned cocktail glasses on the table before him. He connected the man's words with the scene, and a chilling realization dawned. This felt unnervingly similar to the chapter where the protagonist, dreading the night ahead, drank himself into a stupor in a corner of the villain's birthday party. What was the main love interest's name? Something, Ethan. He didn't realize he'd whispered the name aloud, nor did he notice the iron grip on his shoulders suddenly slacken. "I'm right here." The irritation in Ethan's eyes vanished, replaced by something softer as his hand moved to gently stroke Aiden's flushed cheek. The unexpected touch was a jolt of cold water, snapping Aiden back to reality. He responded, "Ethan?" The shock was so profound that Aiden slapped the hand away and scrambled to his feet. The room spun, a wave of dizziness washing over him, and he stumbled. Ethan caught him, but Aiden shoved him off. He muttered a quick apology, saying he needed the restroom. Ethan called after him, but Aiden ignored him, finding a waiter and asking for directions. He walked away with a measured, steady gait that felt unnatural yet deeply ingrained. His lifelong illness had made any hurried movements impossible, and the strict etiquette of his upbringing had conditioned him to a life of calm composure. Ethan, who had started to follow, paused. He watched Aiden's retreating figure, the crisp white suit, the straight back, the slender waist and long legs. Aiden moved with a strange, fluid grace, each step seemingly measured and precise. Something about him was different tonight, exuding a quiet confidence that was both unfamiliar and incredibly appealing. Ethan found himself thinking that the expensive suit he'd picked out had been a good investment after all. The men's room was empty. Aiden stood before the vast marble vanity, staring at the face in the mirror. It was a young, beautiful face, with a hint of boyishness beneath the striking features. The eyes, his own eyes, reflected the sheer panic he felt inside. His hands trembled as he gripped the edge of the counter for support. The boy in the mirror had high cheekbones and perfectly shaped lips. A subtle trace of eyeliner winged out from the corners of his eyes, adding a touch of drama to his appearance. His dark, wavy hair was cut to his shoulders, the top layers pulled back messily, leaving a few artful strands to fall across his forehead. It was a carefully constructed, androgynous look, Ethan's preferred style. Ethan's great unrequited love, his white moonlight as the novel called him, had been a man who enjoyed cross-dressing. Ethan had been obsessed with him but couldn't accept his hobby, and the man had eventually left the country, heartbroken. Then Ethan met the protagonist, a dead ringer for his lost love, and began molding him into a substitute, an ambiguous placeholder. He'd insisted on the longer hair, the makeup, constantly trying to blur the lines. In that moment, Aiden knew for certain. The heart attack at his birthday party hadn't been a close call. He hadn't made it, and now he was trapped in this sordid novel. After the initial wave of terror, a strange sense of calm washed over him, followed by an even stranger sense of relief. He had been born into privilege, given the best of everything except a body that worked. For more than 20 years, he'd been a prisoner in his own home, his emotions carefully managed for fear that any strong feeling could trigger a fatal episode. His family had lived in a state of perpetual anxiety, constantly prepared for his death. In a way, today was a release for everyone. He had siblings to care for his parents. They would be fine. He placed a hand over his chest, taking several deep breaths. Aside from the lingering headache and dizziness, he felt nothing. No pain, no tightness, no weakness. He finally had a healthy body. He swore to himself that he would cherish it. Aiden looked at the boy in the mirror and smiled. An almost giddy excitement began to bubble inside him. He couldn't wait to eat all the greasy, fried, sugary foods he'd never been allowed to touch. He wanted to ride roller coasters, to run until his lungs burned, to finally live without fear. But first, he had to escape this plot. Based on Ethan's confrontation, the story was already at the point where he was about to be handed over to Jax. Once he was in Jax's possession, escape would be infinitely harder. Although Aiden had skipped the details of that night in the novel, he could easily imagine what had transpired. He had to run. Now, his head still felt fuzzy. He turned on the gold-plated faucet and splashed cold water on his face, trying to clear his thoughts. He grabbed a thick linen hand towel to dry off, noticing with a wry smile that the makeup didn't smudge in the slightest. Ethan had bought only the best waterproof cosmetics, the same brands his ex had used. Aiden found it deeply pathetic. Ethan claimed to love the man but couldn't accept him as he was, yet he had no problem projecting that same aesthetic onto a substitute he could view with detached appreciation. It was clear he never saw the protagonist as a real person. Aiden knew that later in the story, once Ethan supposedly fell in love with the protagonist for real, he would demand he cut his hair and act more manly. Utterly hypocritical. He had to get away. Terrified that Ethan might be waiting for him right outside, Aiden crept towards the restroom door, planning to peek out. He edged his head around the doorframe and collided squarely with a solid chest. "Sorry, my fault," Aiden apologized automatically, looking up. The man was a good head taller than him, with a ruggedly handsome face, a sharp jawline, and an intense gaze that seemed naturally intimidating. Definitely not someone to mess with. "Well, look what we have here," the man boomed, a wide, unexpected grin spreading across his face. His accent was thick, a rural drawl that was completely out of place in this setting. "Hey there. Name's Jax. How are you doing?" "Jax?" Aiden took an involuntary step back, his mind racing. The novel had described Jax as a nouveau riche type who'd struck it rich in the mountains. A man with a massive fortune but zero culture. He was desperate to fit into the city's elite circles, but was often ridiculed behind his back for his rough manners and lack of sophistication, which was one of the reasons he became so bitter later on. The book mentioned he was trying to seem more high-class by practicing his English, but this was something else. And hadn't the novel implied he was a tasteless, overweight, middle-aged slob? Aiden had always pictured someone greasy and paunchy. He took another look at the man before him. The description was partially right. The face was undeniably good-looking, but the hair was slicked back with what must have been an entire jar of gel, gleaming under the ballroom lights. His black suit was expensive, but the tailoring was all wrong, hanging off his broad frame in a way that made him look like a teenager wearing his dad's clothes. And instead of a tie, he wore a bright, garish red boello tie with a large turquoise stone. As for the paunch, Aiden couldn't tell. It was hidden beneath the ill-fitting jacket. "Apologies, I have to go," Aiden said politely, trying to sidestep the villain and make a quick exit. "Why's that?" Jax asked, blocking his path. Aiden ignored him and tried to push past, but a sudden, powerful wave of dizziness washed over him. A nauseating heat spread through his body, and his strength seemed to leach away, his vision blurring at the edges. "Whoa there, what's wrong with you?" Jax asked, his expression shifting to confusion as he reached out to steady Aiden, who was about to collapse. "Aiden." Ethan's voice cut through the haze. He appeared suddenly, his eyes narrowing as he saw Jax with his arms around Aiden. He made no move to help. Aiden felt his consciousness slipping. He tried to speak, but his tongue felt thick and useless. This wasn't just alcohol. He frantically replayed the novel's text in his mind. He'd read it so quickly, skipping chapters. What had he missed? That's right. Before the protagonist got drunk, Ethan's mother had come over and handed him a drink. The drink must have been drugged. Ethan's mother had always believed the protagonist was a bad influence, the one who'd turned her son gay. She felt the family's charity had been repaid with betrayal and was determined to break them up, even to punish him. She had a history of forcing the protagonist to entertain Ethan's business clients. Drugging him to ensure he was delivered to Jax was exactly something she would do. He was trapped. Aiden's breath hitched. He forced his eyes to focus on Ethan and reached a hand out to him. According to the original plot, if he went with Jax now, tonight was doomed. Ethan, for all his hypocrisy, was still obsessed with keeping up appearances. He wouldn't let anything truly terrible happen in public. For tonight, at least, Ethan was the safer option. "Take me with you," Aiden managed to force out, his fingers weakly clutching Ethan's sleeve. For a fleeting moment, Ethan's hand covered Aiden's, his expression unreadable. He seemed to hesitate. Jax looked from one to the other. "He ain't feeling so good. Y'all should take him home. We can do this another time. I ain't in a rush." Aiden almost laughed despite the circumstances. This villain was surprisingly accommodating. Ethan's brow furrowed, then smoothed out just as quickly. He pulled his hand away from Aiden's and offered Jax a polite, almost clinical smile. "Nonsense, Mr. Jax. I promised you some company for the evening, and I always keep my word. The party's winding down anyway. Why don't you take him with you now?" With that, he turned and walked away. A true scumbag. Jax tightened his grip on Aiden, holding him up as he looked him over. A slow grin spread across his face. "Well, look at that. Got myself some arm candy. On the house." Aiden's last conscious thought was a bitter one. This damn book didn't treat its protagonist like a human being. Every character was more disgusting than the last. He was woken by an intense, oppressive heat. His whole body felt feverish, an uncomfortable, coiling tension deep within him that manifested in a series of unsettling, erotic dreams. He snapped awake, his eyes flying open to complete darkness. He couldn't see a thing, and for a disorienting moment, he wondered if the whole transmigration had been a hallucination. He scrambled out of bed, fumbling for a light switch, when his hand knocked something over. A sharp crash echoed in the silent room, the sound of glass shattering. The noise was startlingly loud in the pitch-black space. Aiden froze, terrified of stepping on a shard with his bare feet. What incarnation was that? A sliver of light appeared as a small door opened. The figure of Jax was silhouetted in the doorway, the light from behind him making him look enormous and imposing. Aiden's heart sank. It wasn't a dream. He was really in the novel, and just like in the story, Jax had brought him home. What came next was, "Good, you're awake. We can get down to business," Jax said, flipping a switch by the door. The room was flooded with harsh, bare bulb light. Hearing those words, Aiden felt a chill run down his spine. He instinctively backed away, bumping into the edge of a metal frame bed and tumbling onto it. He looked around and realized the room was ridiculously small, barely large enough for the bed and a single nightstand. There were no windows, only the small door Jax now blocked. If not for the clean sheets, it would have felt like a torture chamber from a horror movie. The thought made his heart hammer against his ribs. The novel had been vague about how Jax had tormented the protagonist. Was this room specifically designed for it? As Jax stepped inside, his large frame filling the only exit, Aiden felt a surge of panic. His body was still hot and weak from the drug, leaving him no room to escape. He could only push himself further back on the bed. Jax stopped, his gaze fixing on Aiden. His expression became strange, a mix of curiosity and amusement as his eyes roamed over Aiden's body, his brow occasionally furrowing. Aiden followed his line of sight and felt a hot flush of shame. The drug was still coursing through him, and the way he was sitting had made his arousal painfully obvious beneath the thin fabric of his suit trousers. Aiden, who had been too sick his entire life to even experience the normal surges of puberty, was mortified. It was the first time this had ever happened to him, and it was happening in front of a lecherous villain. He grabbed the thin blanket and pulled it over his lap, forcing himself to meet Jax's gaze. "Mr. Jax, we can talk about this." He tried to sound calm and composed, but the drug made his voice sound breathy. The white suit was still immaculate, but his flushed face and heavy-lidded eyes gave off an unintentionally sultry vibe. What he intended as a cool, sincere stare probably looked more like a pleading, teary-eyed gaze. "Talk?" Jax drawled, a smirk playing on his lips. "I thought you fancy types came with a price tag already set. Didn't think I'd have to negotiate myself." Aiden parsed the meaning through the thick accent, and his face hardened. The shame intensified. Jax was talking about him as if he were for sale. But thinking about the novel, about what Ethan had done, wasn't that exactly what had happened? Ethan had treated him like property, a bargaining chip to be passed around. A new worry surfaced. It wasn't just Jax. Later in the book, Ethan's ex's overprotective older brother captured the protagonist and tortured him for stealing Ethan away. If he couldn't break free from this plot, all of that was still waiting for him. This isn't about a price. It's about a deal that will benefit you. Jax smoothed down his slicked back hair, getting his hand greasy in the process. He quickly balled it into a fist to hide it, then pointed a single finger at the shattered glass on the floor. "Don't need a deal. You were a gift, free of charge. I ain't paying a dime. You broke my glass, and I'm not even making you pay for it. That there's a $5 glass." Aiden was momentarily stunned. He was pretty sure the novel said Jax owned a mining empire. It hadn't mentioned he was a cheapskate. Had he skimmed over that part too? "You have a meeting with the Sterling Corporation tomorrow morning, don't you?" At the mention of the name, Jax's expression turned serious. "What kind of deal?" Aiden allowed a small smile to touch his lips. He knew it. The novel may have painted Jax as a one-dimensional villain, but a man who clawed his way out of obscurity to the top of the corporate ladder had to have ambition. He would care about his business. "Someone is planning to sabotage your deal with Sterling. I know how you can stop them. In exchange, after you successfully sign the contract, you let me go." If he couldn't escape the plot, the next best thing was to change it. A single alteration could create a butterfly effect, making the future easier to navigate. If Jax lost the deal tomorrow as he did in the book, his rage would be unleashed on Aiden, just as it had been on the original protagonist. Aiden worried that even if he ran, Jax would hunt him down. "Let you go?" Jax looked deeply reluctant, his eyes scanning Aiden up and down again. That familiar sense of shame washed over Aiden. This lecherous pig. He had to be careful. Even if Jax agreed, there was no guarantee he'd keep his word. Just as Aiden was silently cursing Jax's base instincts, the man let out a cold laugh. "Why would I let you go? If I let you go, I'd have to pay for the next one. And that costs a pretty penny." Aiden couldn't tell if Jax was more driven by lust or by his own stinginess. The heat from the drug was becoming unbearable, but he forced himself to remain patient. "The money you'll lose if you miss out on this merger could buy you 100 companions." Jax's face fell. He ran a hand through his greasy hair again, then wiped it on his pants when he realized what he'd done. "And why should I believe you?" Aiden held his gaze. "If I were you, Mr. Jax, I'd decide it's better to be safe than sorry. Deal? Tell me what you know." Aiden let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. He threw back the blanket and stood up, forcing his weak, feverish body to stand tall before Jax. "I'll write it down for you. I'll give it to you before you leave tomorrow morning. It was his only leverage to ensure his safety for the night. Jax studied him thoughtfully but didn't object. He just glanced around the small, bare room. "All right, let's go. This maid's room is too stuffy anyway. Your face is red as a beet. We'll find you another room." His face wasn't red because it was stuffy, and surely Jax knew why. What an act. Aiden trailed Jax out of the tiny room, his legs unsteady. He realized they were in a basement. Just beyond the room was a cavernous underground garage containing a single, gleaming black Audi. He'd seen staff quarters in basements before, but they were usually well-finished and comfortable. This was just a basement. Raw concrete and exposed pipes. It felt less like a living space and more like a construction site. This Jax really was a penny-pinching tycoon, living in luxury himself while giving his staff the bare minimum. He was forced to retract that thought when they reached the ground floor. The space was enormous, with floor-to-ceiling windows looking out onto a Japanese-style rock garden. But aside from some brand-new, expensive-looking furniture, the entire floor was also unfinished. Bare drywall, concrete floors, and dangling wires where light fixtures should be. He didn't need to see the second and third floors to know the entire mansion was in the same state. For someone trying so hard to break into high society, it was bizarre that Jax wouldn't even properly finish his own house. "Nice, huh?" Jax asked, seeing Aiden's curious gaze. He puffed out his chest with pride. "Barry Jr. found this place for me. Classic on the outside, but inside it's all the rage right now. Industrial chic, he called it. Fully furnished, move-in ready." Aiden had heard of industrial chic, but this was definitely just an unfinished construction site. He had a strong feeling that this Barry Jr. had taken Jax for a ride. Not his problem. He didn't respond. Jax led him to a guest room on the first floor. Inside, the furniture was all there, but the walls and floor were still bare. An incongruous landscape painting hung on one wall. Aiden's eyes widened, and he froze. Jax, beaming with pride again, pulled Aiden over to the painting. "Great vibe, right? Fits the room perfectly. It's a famous piece by the artist Eleanor Vance. People pay $1 million for her work, but Barry Jr. got it for me for only $900,000. Taste, you know? It's worth it." Aiden stared at the painting, his fingers trembling, a hotness welling up in his eyes. He heard Jax quoting the price and gave the man a look of profound pity. He recognized the painting, of course. The artist Eleanor Vance was his grandmother. She had been a celebrated figure in the art world, a woman of talent and grace. He had been by her side when she passed away from a long illness just a few years ago. He never expected to see her work mentioned in this novel. It was a strange, emotional shock. Even more shocking was the fact that he knew every brushstroke of his grandmother's paintings by heart. And this one was, without a doubt, a terrible fake. A real one might fetch $1 million, but a forgery. Jax, the newcomer to the city, was clearly being played for a fool by the local old money heirs. Perhaps that was another reason for his villainous turn later on. Aiden didn't know what to say, nor did he want to get involved in the villain's personal affairs. He would be gone by tomorrow anyway. The heat in his body was becoming unbearable again. "Excuse me, where is the bathroom?" Jax snapped out of his proud reverie and gave Aiden a leering smile. "Ready for business now?" Aiden's heart leaped into his throat. Jax was still thinking about that? They had a deal. Did he really intend to collect anyway? On guard, Aiden took a step back, about to remind Jax of their agreement, when Jax turned and practically bounded up the stairs, taking them 3 at a time. What was he getting? It wasn't equipment, was it? Remembering the novel's vague references to the protagonist being left without a shred of spirit, Aiden's mind went to the darkest places. He was terrified, and his body was reaching its limit. His legs were shaking, and the unfamiliar sensations caused by the drug were becoming agonizing. He looked around frantically, spotted a door, and pushed it open. A bathroom. He rushed inside, slamming the door and locking it. First, to keep Jax out. Second, he desperately needed a cold bath to wait out the drug. The bathroom was also unfinished, but it contained a large, wooden soaking tub. At this point, Aiden didn't care if it was clean or had ever been used. He grabbed a hose attached to the wall and started filling it with cold water. A sharp knock sounded at the door. "Hey, Canary, what did you lock the door for?" The knocking was rough, and each thud seemed to hammer directly on Aiden's frayed nerves, making his head pound. "Sorry, just need to use your bath for a minute," he called out. The tub was half full. He stripped off his clothes and submerged himself. The shock of the cold water, even in the summer heat, made him gasp, but it also cleared his head a little. He could hear Jax's disgruntled voice from the other side. "You're taking a bath? Is that what canaries do? Aren't you supposed to be drawing my foot bath first?" Aiden had assumed Jax was angry that he'd escaped his clutches. He had no idea what this foot bath business was about. In his previous life, he'd seen the so-called trophies of wealthy heirs. They were usually stunningly beautiful, pampered, and treated like precious jewels. The idea of one of them drawing a foot bath was laughable. He figured this was another piece of bad advice from the illustrious Barry Jr. He stayed in that cold bath for a long time, until the last effects of the drug had completely subsided. He didn't dare borrow any pajamas from Jax. After the cold water had calmed him, he put his suit back on. Desperate times. When he cautiously opened the bathroom door and peered out, he saw Jax sitting on the sofa, apparently having showered as well. He was wearing pajamas and reading a book with intense concentration. At the bathroom door was a wooden basin for soaking feet. So that's what Jax had run upstairs to get. "Foot bath," Jax said, his tone low and demanding. He clearly wasn't over it. Aiden didn't understand his obsession with this ritual, especially since he'd just showered. But when in Rome, or rather, when trapped in a villain's unfinished McMansion, he just had to survive one night. At least Jax wasn't insisting on the other thing anymore. He could be thankful for that. He'd lock his door tonight, wait for Jax to successfully sign the contract tomorrow, and then he'd be free. With that in mind, Aiden silently picked up the basin, went to the bathroom, filled it with warm water, and placed it at Jax's feet. Jax finally looked satisfied, his expression softening. He placed his feet in the water with a contented sigh, balancing the book on his lap and continuing to read. Aiden was about to take the opportunity to slip back to his room and lock the door, when his eyes fell on the book Jax was reading. He froze. It was a Hooked on Phonics workbook. Level 1. The page was open to a lesson on numbers. Jax was muttering to himself, his voice a low, serious rumble as he struggled to remember the spelling. The legendary self-taught business genius, so desperate for the approval of high society that he was teaching himself English from a children's book? Aiden listened closely to Jax's pronunciation and had to stifle a laugh. The novel had painted Jax as a brilliant, self-made man to make Ethan's eventual victory seem more impressive. He had inherited a mountain rich with minerals from his family, who had lived in isolation for generations. Jax was the only one with the courage to leave and build an empire, working his way up from a small-town magnate to a major player in the city. And this business genius was being defeated by a children's workbook. Looking at Jax's earnest expression, Aiden didn't doubt his determination. But if he kept learning this way, he'd only become more of a laughingstock. Mr. Jax, why don't you hire a tutor? This method is for children learning to spell for tests. At your level, conversational fluency is more important. If you could speak English well, you'd already be ahead of half the trust fund kids in this city. No one's going to quiz you on how to spell 11. Jax kept his eyes glued to the book. Tutors cost money. Barry Jr. said I could just learn from the book. Save a bundle. He even bought this for me. Barry Jr. Again. Aiden was now certain the guy was just toying with Jax. And from the way Jax talked about him, he clearly trusted him completely. It wasn't Aiden's place to interfere. You could download a dictionary app, Aiden suggested diplomatically. You can check pronunciation anytime. This book came with a CD. Jax trailed off, finally looking up at Aiden with a dawning horror. Was I saying it wrong? Aiden just smiled, not wanting to bruise the villain's ego. Jax didn't seem offended, just confused, muttering that he'd listened to the CD and it shouldn't be wrong. He wanted to go check it again, but his feet were still in the bucket. After a moment of internal conflict, he looked at Aiden and held out his phone. What's that dictionary app? Get it for me. Aiden took the phone and downloaded a well-regarded app. He typed 11 into the search bar to demonstrate. He tapped the speaker icon, and a crisp, clear female voice enunciated, 11. Jax's brow furrowed. Then his eyes lit up. He took the phone back. Hey, that's real handy. You're not so useless after all, Canary. Thanks. For some reason, the villain's clumsy gratitude made Aiden find him almost charming. He noticed now that Jax's wet hair was tousled, no longer plastered to his head. His pajamas were just an old t-shirt and a pair of baggy board shorts. With his tan skin and thick accent, he looked less like a corporate raider and more like a simple country boy, a world away from the over-the-top caricature at the party. Jax was oblivious to Aiden's scrutiny. He tapped the speaker icon again and again, listening intently. Then he grabbed a pen from a cup on the coffee table and, with great solemnity, wrote something in his workbook. When he was done, Aiden saw that above the word 11, Jax had written a phonetic note for himself, 11. It was a definite improvement over what he'd been mumbling before. Aiden had to bite his lip to keep from laughing out loud. It reminded him of how he'd learned his first English words as a small child, a method his tutors had quickly corrected. What are you Logan at? Did I get it wrong again? No, Aiden said quickly, schooling his expression. He had almost forgotten he was in a dangerous situation. Jax's face hardened. Canary, get the towel. The villain's moods changed on a dime. Aiden looked up and saw the towel hanging on the back of the sofa, easily within Jax's reach. This must be some weird power play, a strange need to dominate his canary. Aiden said nothing, simply got the towel and handed it to him. Jax took it with a look of deep satisfaction and began drying his feet. The next demand, Aiden knew, would be for him to empty the foot bath. He wasn't a snob, but he was still the scion of a noble family. He'd never done a chore like this in his life. Even the maids at his family's estate had more specialized duties. Still, he was trapped, and it was just for one night. As he was debating whether to swallow his pride, the doorbell rang. He remembered seeing a courtyard outside. This must be the gate. Mr. Jax, I'll get the door, Aiden said respectfully, and without waiting for a reply, he turned and walked away. Canary, you're not gonna dump out the water? Aiden pretended not to hear. Outside the main house was a small, Japanese-style garden with a few pavilions and a small pond. The furnishings were old but clean, though the pond and landscaping were a chaotic mess. He wondered if this was another of Barry Jr. design suggestions, the beauty of untamed nature, perhaps? He walked to the main gate. Looking back, he realized the villa itself was actually quite beautiful. With a bit of work, it could be an elegant and tasteful estate. As it was, both inside and out, it was a disaster. The bell rang again. Aiden opened the gate to find a young, clean-cut man holding a cake box. It was Jax's birthday. The thought had completely slipped his mind. The gaudy ballroom suddenly made a lot more sense. "Can I help you?" The young man smiled. "Mr. Aiden? I'm Lucas, Mr. Jax's assistant. Could you please give this to him? I picked out the very best." Picked out the very best? An assistant showing up late at night after a party with the very best cake for his boss? It sounded intimate. The name Lucas didn't ring a bell from the novel. He must have been a minor character. Aiden studied him. He looked young, fresh out of college, with an earnest and sincere expression. Aiden wondered why Jax, supposedly a lecherous villain, would overlook a prime candidate right under his nose and instead go to the trouble of acquiring him from Ethan. As he thought about it, a vague memory surfaced. Lucas didn't have a bigger role in the book because by tomorrow, he would be dead. Ethan's plan to make Jax miss the meeting involved multiple layers of sabotage. Tampering with his car, orchestrating a traffic jam, even causing an elevator malfunction. Jax's assistant was supposed to pick him up in the morning, but when the car broke down and they hit traffic, they split up to try and make it on time. The assistant, tragically, was killed in a car accident. The crash itself was an accident, a random tragedy, but combined with the lost deal, it was the final straw for Jax. He blamed Ethan and the protagonist for everything and began his descent into true villainy. "Mr. Aiden? Is everything all right?" Aiden snapped back to the present, a wave of shock and pity washing over him as he looked at Lucas. "Of course. I'll give it to him." He took the cake box. "Lucas," he added, "tomorrow, no matter how urgent things get, do not take a taxi." Lucas looked baffled. "Huh? I usually take the bus or the subway. I don't take taxis." Aiden couldn't explain further. He just repeated, his voice low and serious, "Tomorrow. No matter what, do not get in a taxi." His intensity seemed to unnerve Lucas, who nodded jerkily. "Okay." Aiden watched him leave, then carried the cake back inside. He didn't know if he could change the fate of a character in a book, but it was a human life. He had to try. Who was it? Jax had just come back from dumping the foot bath himself, a scowl on his face. Aiden felt a small sense of relief. "Your assistant. He brought you a cake. Said he picked out the best." Jax's expression soured. He had clearly been annoyed at having to do the chore himself, thinking a guest had arrived. If he'd known it was just his assistant, he would have made his canary do it. Aiden understood the source of his displeasure and set the cake on the coffee table. "If there's nothing else, I'll go to my room and write down that information for you. I need some time to think it through to make sure I don't miss anything that could affect your deal." Jax's eyes narrowed, as if seeing right through Aiden's attempt to escape. He let out a cold snort. Aiden kept his smile fixed, but subtly shifted his weight, positioning himself closer to the guest room door, ready to bolt if Jax made a move. After a tense moment, Jax grunted. "Just remember your place, canary." Aiden sighed internally. He really wanted to tell him that other rich people's canaries did not, in fact, empty their foot baths. Jax didn't say anything else, just plopped down on the sofa. "Come on. You haven't eaten anything since the party. We'll eat the cake. It's my birthday." Aiden couldn't refuse the birthday boy. He cautiously sat down opposite Jax, keeping his distance. All those people at the party, Jax mused as he opened the box. I wonder how many of them actually meant it when they wished me a happy birthday. Aiden remained silent. Jax paused, his eyes sharp. You look down on me too, don't you? 'Cause I'm from the sticks. That's why you don't want to be my canary. Of course he didn't want to be a canary, but it had nothing to do with where the man was from. The threat in Jax's tone was unmistakable. No, I don't judge people based on their background. That's a good way to put it, Jax said with a sudden, booming laugh. He opened the cake box. Aiden's polite smile froze on his face. Lucas had said he'd picked out the best. But inside the box was clearly leftover cake from the party, a mismatched collection of slices from the giant, multicolored confection, haphazardly arranged. Jax, however, seemed completely unfazed. He happily scooped a large piece onto a plate and handed it to Aiden. Look how much is left. Can't let it go to waste. So that's what Lucas meant. The best referred to the uneaten portions. Aiden had imagined a touching, late-night gesture from a devoted assistant. He'd overthought it. Jax had probably ordered him to do it. This villain was surprisingly frugal. Eat up. There's plenty more. It's real pretty and tastes good, too. Jax took a spoonful of frosting, his eyes closing in bliss. Happy birthday to me. Watching him eat with such gusto, Aiden suddenly felt his own stomach rumble. He was starving, and hearing Jax wish himself a happy birthday, he looked so unexpectedly lonely and pathetic that Aiden couldn't help but smile. Then, a sudden wave of emotion hit him. A lump formed in his throat, and his eyes grew hot. Today was his birthday too, his rebirth into this world. Thank you. Happy birthday, Jax. And happy birthday to me. He picked up his fork and began to eat. Jax watched him and after a moment, seemed to become self-conscious of his own rough eating habits. He deliberately slowed down, mimicking Aiden's refined movements. After the cake, Jax finally let him go. Aiden retreated to his room and locked the door. He was about to shove the nightstand against it when he remembered he didn't have any paper or a pen. He could still hear Jax in the living room, loudly practicing his pronunciation of 11. Steeling himself, he opened the door to ask for writing materials. He found Jax in front of a lighted vanity mirror on the coffee table, carefully applying a sheet mask to his face while continuing to chant his new word. You have a very dedicated skincare routine, Mr. Jax. Barry Jr. said this is what all the high society guys do. Says it makes you look better if your skin's paler. As he said this, Jax's eyes landed on Aiden. Guess he's right. You're real pale. Looks good. Aiden felt a chill. Was the lecherous side coming out again? He quickly grabbed a pen and a notepad from the coffee table and turned to leave. Stop. Jax's voice was suddenly stern. Aiden's heart leaped into his throat as Jax strode towards him. He held up the pen cup, which was filled with a random assortment of colorful pens. He rummaged through them, pulled out a simple black one, and thrust it at Aiden, taking back the purple one Aiden had grabbed. Use this one. Aiden noticed the purple pen was heavily used, while the black one looked brand new. Jax had given him the one he obviously didn't care about. Back in his room, Aiden locked the door and barricaded it with the nightstand. He couldn't take any more of this bizarre villain. He barely slept, waking at every creak and groan of the house. In the morning, when he heard Jax go downstairs, he emerged with the sheet of paper. Jax saw him and immediately scowled. You're just getting up? Aiden, confused, nodded. Jax's frown deepened. Where's breakfast? Was the canary supposed to be a live-in chef, too? Aiden quickly changed the subject, handing Jax the paper. You should probably prepare for this. Jax took the paper and read it aloud. 1. Don't drive your car, It's been tampered with? 2. Take the subway, there'll be a traffic jam? 3. Your assistant shouldn't take a taxi. It's not safe? 4. Take the stairs, the elevator will break? 5. With each point, he looked up at Aiden with growing disbelief. When he finished, his face was grim. Who is planning this? How do you know all this? Aiden was speechless. The original protagonist hadn't known any of these details. His only job was to be a distraction. Aiden only knew because he'd read the book, a fact he obviously couldn't explain. And he couldn't name Ethan yet. Jax would just assume they were working together and dismiss the entirely. His plan to change the plot would fail. I can't tell you. It's up to you whether you believe me or not. Jax's demeanor shifted, the simple country boy vanishing completely, replaced by a cold, calculating stranger. He stared at Aiden for a long, unsettling moment. You stay here and wait for me to get back. Don't even think about running off. Aiden had no intention of running. Not yet. He wanted to see if the plot could truly be changed. However, Jax, ever the villain, didn't fully trust him. Aiden watched as he had a new car delivered. Then, he and Lucas went their separate ways. Jax drove the new car, while he sent Lucas to the subway. Aiden just watched him go, thinking that Jax was still going to get stuck in that traffic jam. He didn't know how things would turn out for Jax, so he decided to use the time to scout the area. If the plot was immutable and Jax returned in a rage, he'd have to make a run for it. Consequences be damned. The villa was in a sprawling, half-developed suburban community by a lake. The houses were all built in a similar style, spaced far apart for privacy. The surrounding area, however, was barren. The nearest subway station was 2 miles away, the closest bus stop a mile. There were hardly any taxis. He was stranded. He decided his best bet might be to hide somewhere within the development itself. Jax would never expect him to stay so close. He eventually wandered into a nearby, mostly empty shopping plaza. He stood before a small diner, his stomach growling. He hadn't eaten since the cake last night. As he was about to step inside, he remembered a critical problem: money. In his past life, he'd never had to worry about it. He patted his pockets and found only a smartphone. The screen showed several unread notifications. As he held it, his finger accidentally brushed against the fingerprint sensor on the back. The phone unlocked. For a second, he felt a pang of guilt, like he was invading a stranger's privacy. Sorry, he thought to the phone's original owner. I'll take care of things for you from now on. He opened the messaging app. There were 3 conversations. The first was from Ethan. Has Jax left yet? Just a simple question dripping with self-interest. In the novel, the protagonist had gone willingly with Jax. Ethan hadn't known about the drugging until later. But yesterday, Aiden had begged Ethan for help. Ethan had made his choice. This message, with not a single word of concern for his well-being, was disgusting. He didn't bother replying. The second was from a Mrs. Miller, Ethan's mother. The A prefix showed how important these people were to the original Aiden. Your grandmother is always so thoughtful. She drove all the way into the city just to bring us one of her watermelons. A second message followed. It's a long trip for an old woman. I've asked her to stay for a few days. Make sure you get the job done and come back for some watermelon. Aiden's blood ran cold. It was a thinly veiled threat. He had been so focused on his own escape that he'd forgotten about the protagonist's only living relative. Now that he inhabited this body, she was his responsibility. He felt a surge of fury. He had both contacts, removing the A from their names. He would not let Ethan win. If Jax succeeded, he could negotiate for his grandmother's release. If Ethan succeeded, He would be the one suffering with no one to help him. The final message was from B. Art Fusion Center MS. Wong, Aiden, are you coming in today? We can process your full-time contract. The director said we can pay you the full-time salary for this month. Congratulations. A smile touched Aiden's lips, just when he needed it most. He was worried about money. The original Aiden was a fine arts major, a talented painter who had given up a scholarship to study abroad so he could stay and help Ethan. He'd been working as an instructor at an art center. Aiden's own artistic training came from his grandmother. He was more than capable of taking over the job. He looked at his mobile banking app. Balance, 0. CR card debt, 3,000. Any hesitation about the job vanished. He messaged MS Wong back, telling her he was on his way. He used his CR card to order the cheapest bowl of soup on the diner's menu. As he ate in a corner booth, a young waitress, clearly charmed by him, shyly brought over a plate of onion rings. On the house, she whispered with a sweet smile. He gave her a smile back that made her blush. Thank you. He knew it was an act of kindness. He took a bite, and his taste buds exploded. In his old life, he'd been on a strict, bland diet. Fried food was a revelation. This is the most delicious thing I've ever eaten, he said with heartfelt sincerity. After finishing every last crumb, he bought a cheap white t-shirt and a pair of jeans from a discount store. He then took an Uber to the Art Fusion Center. In the HR office, he learned that the original Aiden had been absent for several days. They had offered him the full-time contract to entice him to stay. The salary was modest, but it was a start. He needed to find a side hustle to make more money. So, will you be coming in to teach tomorrow? The kids miss you, the HR manager asked. Aiden didn't know how to answer. It all depended on Jax. Aiden, are you in some kind of trouble? A man in his 30s rushed into the office, closing the door behind him. It was the center's director. There's a man outside looking for you. He looks furious. Aiden's heart sank. The meeting was over. Who was here for him? Ethan or Jax? Neither was a good option. He smiled calmly. It's fine, I'll go see. He opened the door and found himself face to face with the furious man. Canary, who gave you permission to run off? Jax stood there, his face a thundercloud, his large frame blocking the hallway. He was back in his ill-fitting suit and greasy hair, looking every bit the small-town mob boss. Aiden was stunned. This wasn't supposed to happen. He had given Jax all the information. How could he have failed? Was the protagonist's plot armor really that strong? Knowing this was no place for a confrontation, he took a deep breath. I've told you before, my name is Aiden, not Canary. He then turned to the director with a bright smile. So sorry about this. This is my cousin from out of town. He's not all there, you know? I'm supposed to be looking after him. He was banking on the fact that Jax's thick accent was difficult to understand. He grabbed Jax's arm, his grip surprisingly firm, and began steering him away, whispering, we can talk about this. Whatever it is, we can solve it. Just calm down. Jax, for all his bluster, allowed himself to be led away. In the parking lot, he shoved Aiden into the passenger seat of his car and slammed the door. He got in and locked the doors. Aiden's heart hammered. This was it. He was trapped. He tried to calm his racing thoughts. He had read the book, he had knowledge Jax didn't. He still had bargaining chips. He decided to go on the offensive. I told you not to drive. You got stuck in traffic, didn't you? Jax, who had been about to yell, was taken aback. He looked almost embarrassed as he ran a hand through his hair. Well, yeah, that was my bad. I shouldn't have doubted you. Got stuck for a long time. Had to ditch the car and run the rest of the way. And I took the stairs, like you said. All 17 floors. I was beat. Aiden frowned. Something wasn't right. You weren't late? Nope, Jax said with a grin. Heard later the elevator really did break down. Good thing I ran, or I would have been. If he wasn't late, then how could he have lost the deal? So, the merger with Sterling? Oh, that went great. Signed on the dotted line. Then why? Aiden asked, completely bewildered. Did you storm into my workplace looking like you were gonna murder me? Jax's good mood vanished. His face darkened, and he lunged across the console, grabbing Aiden's chin. Guess who crashed the meeting while I was in the middle of it? Ethan, of course, Aiden said, his voice steady despite the painful grip. You admit it. Jax sneered, releasing him. So you are his spy. I knew it was too good to be true, getting a high-class canary for free. You were setting me up. But I still helped you, Aiden countered. You know how valuable this deal is. If I were really on his side, why would I have betrayed him? Jax seemed to waver. Aiden pressed his advantage, his expression shifting to one of profound sadness. The truth is, Ethan and I had a falling out. Why else do you think he would have just given me to you? He didn't just hand me over. He's holding my grandmother hostage to make sure I cooperate. But I refused to help him. My poor grandma. He let his voice crack, and his eyes welled up with genuine-looking tears. Jax stared at him, his hard expression softening. Aiden looked so young and vulnerable in his plain white t-shirt. He didn't look like a liar. If you betrayed him, what about your grandma? Aiden looked at him with pleading eyes. I was hoping that if I helped you, a powerful man like you could help me get her back. Right? Don't push your luck, Canary. Our deal was that I'd let you go. Don't get greedy. So, saving his grandmother and gaining his freedom were mutually exclusive. For now, his grandmother's safety was the priority. Fine. I'll stay as your canary. But you have to help me save my grandmother. Ethan must be furious with me. I'm worried about what he'll do to her. Jax studied him for a long time before finally starting the car. I still don't fully trust you. We're going back to my house and you're staying put. If you run off again, I promise I will punish you. Severely. And my grandmother? After I drop you off, Jax grumbled, I'm going over to the Miller's place to get her. That snake Ethan tried to cheat me. He's got a punch coming. Aiden was relieved, if a little alarmed by Jax's plan to just go get her. But he remembered from the novel that Jax was a formidable fighter. The method didn't matter, as long as his grandmother was safe. Oh, and was Lucas okay? He took the subway. Got there 10 minutes before me. Aiden sighed in relief. Just then, the car made a loud popping sound and skidded to a stop. He looked around. It was the black Audi from the garage. Why did you drive this car? Jax was staring at him with a sour expression. The new one's still stuck on the highway. Was in such a hurry to come find you. I forgot this one was busted. Aiden felt a chill. They were lucky it was just a minor failure. He looked over and saw Jax was still staring at him suspiciously. Was he thinking Aiden had sabotaged this car, too? Jax's eyes narrowed. Not many people been to my house. If it wasn't you, who was it? Barry Jr. Aiden blurted out. He's connected to Ethan. It was a guess, but a logical one. Barry Jr. clearly enjoyed seeing Jax make a fool of himself. He wouldn't want him to succeed. No way, Jax said, but he didn't sound convinced. Barry Jr. S helped me out more than anyone since I got to this city. Jax was silent for a moment, clearly conflicted. He seemed to believe Aiden, but he didn't want to. If Barry Jr. wasn't a true friend, then he had no one. At the Miller's estate, an old woman in a faded men's t-shirt was trying to leave. "I gotta go," she said cheerfully to the impeccably dressed woman following her. "Gotta sell my watermelons." Mrs. Miller forced a smile. "Oh, Eleanor, don't be silly. You should stay and rest. Aiden will be home soon. My grandson's a busy boy. Don't want to be a bother." The old woman, Aiden's grandmother, reached the imposing iron gate and waited for it to open. Mrs. Miller gave a subtle signal to the guard in the security booth, and the gate remained closed. Just then, a car pulled up and honked. The guard, recognizing the car, opened the gate. "Grandma, what are you doing here?" Ethan got out of the car, his face a mask of concern. "Ethan, you're back," the old woman said, delighted. "Where's Aiden?" she asked, peering into his car. Ethan's smile faltered. He pulled his mother aside. "Jax made the meeting. He signed the deal with Sterling. I showed up and just made myself look like a fool." "What? How?" his mother hissed. "Where is Aiden?" "I don't know, he hasn't answered any of my messages. Something must have happened to him." "Well, keep the old woman here for now," Mrs. Miller said. "She's our only leverage." Aiden's grandmother, tired of their hospitality, saw the gate was still open and made a break for it. "Stop her," Mrs. Miller shouted. A security guard lunged for the old woman, but before he could grab her, he let out a yelp of pain. The next thing she knew, she was standing behind a very large, very intimidating man. "Well, Mr. Miller," Jax said, releasing the guard's wrist. "Leaving the gate open for me? How thoughtful." He hadn't expected the rescue to be this easy. Ethan was shocked. "Jax? What are you doing here?" Jax didn't answer. He just grabbed Ethan by his tie and punched him squarely in the jaw. Ethan crumpled to the ground. "You mountain savage!" Mrs. Miller shrieked. Ethan waved off the guards. He knew Jax was here for a reason. He saw the old woman behind him. "Jax, let's talk about this." "Don't involve an old woman. This punch is for our friendship," Jax snarled. "I thought you were my friend. But you sabotaged my car, the traffic, the elevator. You're a real snake." With every accusation, the color drained from Ethan's face. How did you know all that? What have you done with Aiden?" He didn't suspect Aiden of betraying him. He knew Aiden wasn't aware of the details, which meant Jax had a spy in his own camp. The thought was terrifying. This man wasn't just a clumsy oaf, he was dangerous. Hearing Ethan's concern for Aiden only made Jax angrier. The canary had claimed they'd had a falling out. Had he been lying? "Oh, your little canary?" Jax said with a cruel laugh. "I punished him, of course. Made him pay the price for your little scheme." Ethan felt a physical pain in his chest. His plan had backfired so horribly. He had hurt Aiden. "Let him go. He's innocent." "Let him go?" Jax scoffed. "He's my canary now." He grabbed the old woman's arm and pulled her towards his car. Back at the mansion, Aiden was in the kitchen, staring at the stove in despair. Jax had returned, dropped off his grandmother, and then left again after growling, "Canary, I want to see lunch on the table when I get back." Aiden had never cooked a meal in his life. He managed to find a recipe online for a simple bone broth soup. It seemed foolproof. Just boil bones in water. When Jax returned, the house was filled with the aroma of cooking. He was pleased. "Aiden," his grandmother cried, rushing to him. They both asked if the other was okay. "What is that man?" she whispered. "He punched Ethan. Did he hurt you?" "It's okay, Grandma. It's just a business arrangement," Aiden reassured her, though he felt a bit of satisfaction at the thought of Ethan getting punched. He served up 3 bowls of his soup, which was, unfortunately, a cloudy, greasy mess with overcooked, bloated noodles. Jax took one look at it, then one taste, and his face contorted in disgust. "What is this? Did you even cook this for more than 10 minutes? Aiden, who had never been criticized for his abilities in his life, felt a flush of shame. I don't know how to cook. Are you even a real canary?" Jax roared. "I bet you're still working with Ethan, trying to poison me." Aiden saw his chance. "If you don't trust me, I can just leave. Don't even think about it." Jax's face changed again. "Ethan is still asking about you. You think I'm gonna let you run back to him? No way. I told him I'd punish you severely, and I will. Starting tomorrow, you're cleaning this entire mansion, top to bottom." It wasn't the kind of punishment Aiden had expected. Before he could react, his grandmother, having assessed the situation, stepped in. "Don't be angry, sir. I'll cook. I'll make lunch right now." She bustled into the kitchen. Aiden turned to Jax. "Look, I'm no good at cooking or cleaning, but I'm a painter. I can do murals. I can decorate this entire house for you, make it the envy of everyone in the city." Jax laughed. "I don't need decorating. This industrial chic is unique. Do you really trust what Barry Jr. tells you?" Aiden asked quietly. "What if I can prove he's working with Ethan?" He explained his theory, that Ethan, worried about him, would send the only person who had access to Jax to check on him, Barry Jr. Jax was conflicted. Just then, his assistant Lucas called, confirming that Barry Jr. had just called him, asking about Jax's schedule for the day, something he had never done before. The seed of doubt in Jax's mind began to sprout. When Barry Jr. arrived later that day, carrying a rolled-up canvas, he was greeted by a shocking scene. Aiden, dressed in a t-shirt that had been artfully ripped to shreds, with what looked like bloody welts peeking through, was miserably mopping the floor. Jax stood over him, cracking a small rope whip against the floor. "Faster! Canary! No slacking!" Barry Jr. went pale. "Jax, my friend. I came to invite you to a private art auction." "An auction?" Jax said, setting aside his whip. "Hope there aren't any fakes there. Selling fakes to your friends, that'd make a man lower than a dog, right?" Barry Jr. forced a laugh. "Of course not. In fact, I brought a treasure for you to see. It's a masterpiece by your favorite, Eleanor Vance." At the mention of his grandmother's name, Aiden froze. Barry Jr. unrolled the canvas. It was a painting of a serene boy sitting before a window, painting a bamboo forest. "See?" Barry Jr. said excitedly. "The genius is in the detail. Look at the painting the boy in the painting is painting. It's a painting within a painting." Jax stared at the artwork, mesmerized. He wasn't looking at the technique. He was captivated by the image of the boy. He was so beautiful, so ethereal, he looked like he belonged to another world. It was the most beautiful thing Jax had ever seen. He felt as if he could step right into the canvas. Aiden, however, was staring at it for a different reason. He knew this painting. It was one of his grandmother's most famous works. It was called The Artist. And the boy in the painting, the one sitting by the window, lost in his own world, was him.